Welcome to the Distinguished Physical Education Podcast. This is Gary Zaharatos. I'm excited to announce a partnership with the Health and Physical Education Collective led by Jordan Manley. Their mission is to serve health and physical education teachers through a vibrant community, ongoing professional learning, and partnerships with health and physical education organizations. Jordan reached out to me a couple months ago, and I was honored to be asked to create content for the collective. We set up a Distinguished Physical Education group, which you can navigate to once you download the app or check out the website. Within that group, you can find a new course that I started creating. The first session of the course is already available. It follows Chapter 1 of the book Becoming a Distinguished Physical Education Teacher and is on promoting inclusivity and engagement in physical education. So once you've had a chance to read Chapter 1, head on over to the Health and Physical Education Collective and test your knowledge and engage with community members on Session 1 of the DPE online course. You can find the link in the notes to the episode. They will also be hosting a book chat on Thursday, November 7th at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, so feel free to head on over to the website or use their app and RSVP. We hope to see you there. Today I'm speaking with Mark Lombardi. Mark received his Bachelor in Kinesiology with an emphasis in K-12 education at University of Northern Colorado. He also has a Master's in Curriculum and Instruction. Mark has been teaching at Godsman Elementary in Denver Public Schools for 23 years now. To be at the same school for over 2 decades feels like a rarity these days, and Mark often expresses how fortunate he is that he has had the opportunity to work and grow with the same community for his entire teaching career. Mark and I discussed accountable talk structures in physical education, how our views on student talk in PE have shifted over the years, some common misconceptions that PE teachers have surrounding student talk in PE, the impact that accountable talk structures have on student learning, which talk structures lend themselves well to physical education class, common challenges to implementing accountable talk structures, and other topics. For more on implementing accountable talk structures in PE, be sure to read Chapter 7 in Becoming a Distinguished Physical Education Teacher. And now I bring you yet another distinguished physical education teacher from Denver Public Schools, Mark Lombardi. Mark, I am grateful that you agreed to discuss accountable talk structures in PE today, so thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Definitely feel very fortunate to have the invitation.
I recorded an episode with Jen Smith like a month ago, and it was on standards-based content and language objectives. We really stressed the fact that we wanted teachers to be able to provide students with opportunities to demonstrate things physically, just like you would in any PE class. And then we added on that extra layer, which we know is a requirement in DPS, where we want students to be able to articulate their learning verbally as well. So I had a lot of teachers reach out to me and ask, well, what does that look like? How do we set up efficient, accountable talk structures in the gym? So you were the first person I thought of, and you agreed. So here we are.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I'm the first person you thought of. So,
yeah. So you've been in education for 20 years, all at the same school.
You're number 23.
23 years. I'm wondering a little bit about how your thinking has changed in regards to students not just having to demonstrate something physically, but also articulate their learning from 23 years ago to today. Have you always been a huge advocate of accountable talk structures, or has your thinking changed throughout the decades?
I think it's definitely changed. Like coming into teaching, I didn't think one time that we would have to have accountable talk. I thought it was all physical stuff. And I remember it was a few years ago, I had a good friend, Bonnie. She was my coach, and she was the one that first introduced it to me and said, all right, this is kind of the way DPS is rolling. And she started me putting up words in the gym and doing that kind of stuff. And once I started doing that, then the PDs that we had through DPS, they kind of showed us that talking, how to do it and whatnot. And it has evolved a lot. It has evolved a ton. And it's changed my way of actually teaching as well, in a good way, definitely in a good way. And my views, at first I was just like, there's no way. There's no way this is going to work. There's no way. You expect me to teach these kids to talk plus to do this and this. But actually it's helped my teaching a lot. And it's helped the kids learn much, much better.
I think it's really powerful to hear you say that, because a lot of folks are going to be thinking the exact same thing. You might have made that progress throughout the last 20 years, but there's going to be people right now who are saying like, I don't know if I should have time set aside in my PE class for students to talk. What are the advantages of it? What does it even look like? How do we do it efficiently so that I'm not taking time away from students being physically active? Let's start with the why. Why do you think it's important to include opportunities for students to articulate their learning in PE?
Well, I feel like it's important because it helps them understand it. At the beginning of each unit, obviously, I'll like demonstrate and go over all the vocabulary that we need to know for the physical skill. But once we kind of go over the physical stuff, them talking to each other helps them learn the cues that we need to. For example, like overhand throw. I can show them over and over and over again how to do it, but when they see the cues for how to do it and then they talk to each other how to do it, I feel like they learn it better from each other. Like I can stand there all day and they look at me. I would rather them talk to each other and learn it and go over it that way. I even have them test each other how they do that, going over the cues for whatever we're doing. Might just be the overhand throw, but for whatever we're doing. But I think they learn better from each other too. I've learned that, like I said, they don't want to hear me talk all day, every day. They love talking to each other. So I let them talk to each other, but it also needs to be in a organized way. If it's not organized, then they just kind of go off and talk about other things. So the organization is key.
Yeah. And teachers aren't going to last 23 years in this business if all they do is talk all day, every day, right?
No,
not going to happen.
No.
You mentioned that having students do things like describe skills that they're going to be practicing for that day, or even sequence, put them in order. Maybe even there's opportunities for students to provide feedback to a partner, and then they're using that content vocabulary as well as they provide areas of strengths or next steps. You said that students talking about those things helps improve their physical skills. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
I feel like when you learn exactly what it is first, if you're knowing what the cues are for, like I said, example, like a throw or a kick, if you know what to do first, then it'll help them actually do it. And one thing that I do is my basketball unit, they have to actually record each other and they watch each other dribbling. And then they actually look at the recording and they'll have a paper going over the cues that they need to do. If they know those cues, when they're tested, they'll know exactly what to do. Like I said, it just helps them, I feel like, get it better, like learning it words first and then getting into the physical actually aspect of it, I think helps them learn and master the skill much, much better.
I've seen the same thing in the teachers that I support and work with throughout DPS as well. I feel like it also allows students to share with people outside of PE, whether it's a principal or a parent, any interested party who wants to know what they learned in PE today, and they're able to articulate more than just the sport or just the game. They don't say things when they leave your class like, oh yeah, in PE today, we learned how to play soccer. They say, oh, we learned how to dribble a soccer ball, and I can describe for you what dribbling a soccer ball looks like, right? So it really elevates the level of not just physical rigor, but cognitive rigor that students experience in a PE class like yours.
Yep, totally agree with that. Yeah, definitely. They don't go home and say it's like we're playing soccer. And that's one thing that was a shift though, because like when I first started doing the talk, they had a very hard time doing it because they were like, no, why are we talking in here? Why are we doing this? They just want to play soccer. They want to play basketball. They want to play hockey, but getting them to learn the actual skill is what helps. So that the accountable talk definitely helps them get that.
Let's talk about that culture shift for a moment. What did that look like as you were trying to get students to realize that this isn't just a place where we're just going to play games all day long? You're still going to get plenty of activity, but I'm also going to ask you to articulate what you're learning, and we're going to have standards-based objectives. We already talked about the shift that you made in your thinking. How long did it take for students to realize the vision that you had for your PE program?
Yeah, it took a long time. It took a while. First, it took me a while to kind of get down like how I wanted to show them how to do it. And once I showed them, the kids, we're not going to say defiant, but just were like, why are we doing this? Like, what are we doing this for? And I kind of had to explain to them, like, we're doing this so it'll help you learn the skill. The first few years were a little bit rough, honestly, but the more that they got used to doing it, the more we did it. And the more that I learned different ways to do it, the better the kids got at it. There's still those few kids that still have a little bit of a hard time doing it, but I try different ways to get them involved. But the kids have learn to do it every day. Like I do it every day. Every time they're here, they do it. So they've gotten used to it because they've done it every single day.
I think that consistency is key, along with you constantly reevaluating the methods that you have for implementing those. So I think it's okay to say that, yeah, I tried an accountable talk structure in my first year or my second year that I was interested in doing this, and it didn't quite work out. And you were reflective enough and able to just make some shifts so that you could continue to have those important opportunities for students to talk accountably throughout your PE classes. So another reason that it's important to incorporate accountable talk structures is for assessment. Can you talk a little bit about how you use accountable talk as part of your assessment process?
Usually at the end of each unit that we do, I put them in partners or sometimes groups, depending on how many kids we have in there. And they will have to physically watch them. I kind of used an example earlier about using iPads. I feel like sometimes the iPads is better so you can kind of go back and look at it. That's one way. So they have to look at it and then they verbally talk about, all right, this is one cue you did good. This is one thing you need to work on. But also with the littler kids, what I've learned is it's a little harder for them. And when I start them out, they'll be assessing how to gallop, how to skip. And then they'll have to say, all right, you're galloping good because you had one foot in front and the other, so on and so on. You're skipping because you're hopping on one foot, hopping on the other foot. So they are actually assessing each other, how they're doing it. And not just with we do with the pathways, with the speeds, all those different things that they do. So that's the assessment part. Yeah, I mean, like I said, talking to each other, they are actually harder on each other, assessing each other than I would be on them, So I feel like someone's skipping great, but they're like, no, he didn't skip that one time, I'm like, all right, well, he's doing a pretty good job, saying with basketball, dribbling below their knees, if it's not exactly at their knee, they're harder on each other. So they help each other learn the skill throughout the whole unit, but at the end is when they kind of bring it all together.
So you're giving students these opportunities to use language that's directly aligned to the standards-based content and language objectives that you are communicating to them for that day. What does it look like when you want to try to capture some of that data? That's something that I've always tried to find a better method for. I've used and I've recommended that teachers use a clipboard with your class roster on it, and you might have a column for the physical demonstration of the skill, and then you might have another column for verbal articulation of the skill that you could then align to a rubric. So you're not writing down everything that students say, but you could say, today's goal was that students were going to obviously improve physically on their skipping and galloping. I also wanted them to be able to describe what skipping and galloping looks like. And you can use a rubric that you created to give students a quick score on whether or not they were able to do that description. In my experience, when teachers are capturing data in the gym, they're not necessarily trying to capture data for every single student in every single class, because that just doesn't seem like a reasonable ask. They're trying to capture data for, I don't know if I would put a specific number on it, but maybe it's 8 or 10 or 12 kids per day. And then by the end of the unit, you now have a body of evidence that shows that 10 students were or were not quite able to describe skipping and galloping on Monday. And then you have a different group of students who were able to describe a different locomotor movement on Tuesday or Wednesday, or however it is that your unit looks. Do you have any ideas on how to make the capturing of the data any more efficient?
I've done the checklist before, kind of like you mentioned, just have the class roster. And just like you said, when they're doing something, I usually check them off. And like you said, it's impossible to get every kid done, especially with the big classes. Other than the checklist, I kind of just, as they're talking, this is more of I don't know, just the way I do it. I just make sure that they're talking first, and make sure that they're, especially with the littler ones, make sure that they're getting down the accountable talk first. And then obviously the physical part of it, I can tell you right now who can skip, gallop and whatever, just because I've seen these kids, it seems like forever, I've had them for long enough that I know who can do what, It's the accountable talk that I'm starting to keep track of more, that if they're doing it, are they having that conversation? Are they using full sentences when they have the conversation? Are they using the sentence stem that I provide them in the conversation? Are they using the academic vocabulary that I'm trying to teach them that is on the TV that I have? That's what I keep track of. But other than the checklist, I haven't really done anything other than, the checklist kind of thing.
Maybe some teachers who are listening will reach out to us and they'll share some brilliant ideas for how to capture some of this data because I'm
That'd be
all
great.
ears.
Yeah, no, I would love it too because it feels like there's so much going on and it's so little time that you're just kind of this like, I mean, there's stuff that you have to do. Obviously, you have to collect this data, but it's just a matter of how you do it, and I would love to hear other ideas as well.
I think people are going to want to know exactly what accountable talk structures might work best in the gym. Are you able to share some different types of accountable talk structures that you found to be most effective in your PE class?
Yeah, so one that I do, and this is one that I do mostly every day with the older kids, so third through fifth grade. Every day they come in and with their warm-ups, I usually put them together for sit-ups. And usually I randomly choose a partner. I use the class dojo to kind of randomize it. And so they're not always with the same partner. And then what I have on my TV is what I have them talk about. So these last few weeks, we've been talking about the health-related fitness components. And I'll have like a sentence stem on the TV that they use. And so this last few weeks has been name one of our locomotor skills. And one of them would have to name a locomotor skill. And the other one would say, an exercise or activity we can do to improve this locomotor skill is, and so they just need to fill in the gaps, and it's usually pretty quick. I give them a couple minutes to do their sit-ups and then have that conversation and then just give me a thumbs up when they're done. That's the beginning of the class, what I usually do. But then during the class, what I'll do is like every once in a while, just say, stop, turn and talk with somebody in your group about what activity or exercise are you doing right now that will help you improve whatever health-related fitness component. One thing I do, like I said, with basketball, find a partner that has the same color basketball as you. Talk about why dribbling below your knees is important. Just giving them chances throughout the day to kind of do it. It usually depends on, like I said, our activity we're doing. It's a little easier, like when everybody has a piece of equipment, like they'll all get together, like, all right, choose someone that has the same basketball color. Choose someone that has the same color shirt. Just like try to mix it up, because if you don't, then they're just going to pick the same people every single time. And that's what I try to get away from, because I want them to talk, and I want them to talk to different people too, not just their friends, because if they talk to their friends, they're usually probably not going to talk about what I asked them to talk about. But what I'll do is I'll go around and ask them, but I'll also tell them, after this minute, I'm going to be asking some of you what you talked about, and give me a thumbs up when you're done. And usually I don't have to randomly call on people. There'll be people that will raise their hand and give me the answer.
There's a lot there that I want to talk more about. One thing that I got from what you just said was about efficiency. So you're providing students with opportunities to communicate with each other when they are doing warm-up exercises. You're not taking, at least for that first part of class, you're not taking time away from your lesson to make them talk about the fitness components and give examples of them. They're doing push-ups and sit-ups together, and it's just kind of a collaborative environment that you have weaved accountable talk into. I think that's brilliant. There have, over the years, I've been doing this for 10 years, there's been some teachers who just say, look, I just don't have time in this class to have students talk. And then I'll watch them spend 4 minutes going from the gym out to the soccer field with no expectations on what that could potentially look like. So I think it's brilliant that you are trying to find opportunities during the lesson to just embed the accountable talk in a way that doesn't really detract from physical activity. The other part that you talked about were ways to hold students accountable for the conversations, because we know that especially when teachers are new at trying this and students are not used to it in the gym, you're going to give them a question that's related to the objective, and they're probably going to talk about the Broncos game last Sunday, right? Or or someone that they have a crush on or something like that. So let's pause there for a moment and talk about some ways that we can hold students accountable. You mentioned one way, which was telling students at the end of this 60-second conversation, I'm going to ask people to share out whole group, right? Do you have any other ideas about holding students accountable?
When I go around and I talk to them, like when I go around and listen to them, I feel like that's a way that I hold them accountable too. So I try to walk around to every group, as much as maybe not every group, because I only give them a few minutes to do it. But, I'll walk around this side of the gym first time, and I'll listen to the people on this side of the gym. And then the second time I stop them, I'll walk around that side of the gym to see if they're talking about it. Also, what I've learned, especially this year with my third grade class, they've had a little bit of a hard time starting to do this accountable talk. And one thing that I've done is I've had to give them actual physical pieces of paper
Hmm.
with stuff that I need them to talk about. And it has taken a little longer than I wanted to, but it's helped me keep them accountable for actually doing it. So I gave them a health related fitness component and then like the sentence stem. And then they just had to fill in the sentence stem, just like a word or two. So it wasn't a lot of writing, but they filled it in. And that's how I've held them accountable doing it. Usually with like, once I get it, like with the fourth and fifth graders, I'll just, like I said, just let them know I'm talking about it. If I say, all right, I heard from this group, I'm going to hear from another group, and just be ready. Make sure you're ready. I'm going to hear from every single group before the day is over. And honestly, there's not like 10 groups, maybe, 15 tops. So I'll hear from every group at least one time.
I think that's a very reasonable goal, is that if you are going to aim to have, let's say, 3 accountable talk opportunities throughout the course of a lesson, and you can facilitate conversations or check in with various groups of students. If you can do that with 3 or 4 groups of students, you've now talked to 6 or 8 different students for each one of those times, right? You don't need to get to every single student for every single group, but that's just another way to hold students accountable, is to check in with a couple of pairs of students each time, and to even tell students, just like you said, I love that transparency, just saying that, yeah, by the end of class, I'm going to do my best to come around and hear what you are learning.
And I think it helps the students know that I'm going to be coming around. And I'll usually have, like, especially when we're doing an activity, there'll be a sentence demo. There'll be something up there for them to look at. It kind of guides their conversation. It's not just like, all right, just have a talk. It'll guide them on what they need to talk about and how they talk about it. Because I think that's the hardest part with some of them, the students. They don't necessarily know how to have that conversation. It's not just saying 1 or 2 words each, it's having a conversation with each other. I think that's been the hardest thing with third grade right now, is they don't necessarily know how to have that conversation, that accountable talk. They're just like saying, oh, 1 word answers, I want you to have a conversation. One person says this, and then you respond to the other person. Like, it's not just one person talking, it's a conversation. We're talking to each other. So I think that's what's been helpful with that. So
that kind of sounds like giving students roles in the conversations. When I have a teacher who's struggling implementing accountable talk structures because it's something brand new, kids aren't quite used to it yet, one thing that I try to recommend early in the process is to give students roles. And you've mentioned it a couple of times now. So it can be as explicit as the student who is, you can call a color row, or like what wall they're facing. So the student in the blue row who is facing the east wall is going to start by describing a fitness component. The student who's in the red row or facing the west wall can then give an activity or an exercise that aligns that fitness component and justify that alignment. So you're giving very specific roles to students and to have those conversations so that they can be held accountable for them. You mentioned resources a handful of times too. I know that you also said handing students like sentence stems physically on a piece of paper, you project them up on the wall. One thing that I just wanted to highlight there was you had mentioned students maybe just using single word answers and how we get students to have conversations with each other. That's where the language functions and form come in and are really handy. So we want to make sure that when we are communicating to students what we expect them to articulate for any given question, that they're not just given the cues for a skill like stepping and hopping for skipping, for example, but they're also given the language forms that we expect them to use. So if students are going to be describing something, we want to make sure that they know we expect them to describe what skipping looks like or what skipping feels like, right? So that they have those looks like and feels like words along with it so that they can create a conversation. If we want them to do a different language objective, like comparing and contrasting skipping versus galloping, we also want to make sure that they have words like similar and different as resources, whether that's on a piece of paper or up on the wall, so that they can say things like skipping is different than galloping, and here are my reasons why. Whenever a teacher tries to implement something new, there's always going to be some challenges that they face. So what are some challenges that you faced when you were implementing accountable talk in PE? And how did you overcome them in order to create a productive and engaging environment?
Definitely a few challenges. Here at Godsman, we have in all DPS schools, there's a lot of English language learners, ELLs. So that has been probably my biggest challenge, is the kids that might not speak as well as English as others. So the ELLs, getting them to kind of talk. I feel like part of my job is to teach them English. And I sometimes have words that are in Spanish, but I sometimes don't. And Spanish is our other second language for the most part. There's a few other like Vietnamese, but it's either English or Spanish. And what I try to do is have them partner up with Ila S and Ila E. Like they partner up with each other because I feel like it helps the ELLs learn better. If the Spanish kids were talking with the Spanish kids every time, like, I don't know, I feel like they wouldn't, not necessarily learn as much because they would, but part of my job is to help them develop their English, Basically, like I said, the language barrier has been the hardest part and one of the hardest part for the kids to get used to, especially like I get a lot of kids that come straight from Mexico, Venezuela. They're like, why are we talking in PE? But then getting them talking to other kids, other than the Spanish speakers or the ELA S kids, I want them to talk to the English kids, and that's been the hardest part. Giving as students, like I said, the sentence stems and the papers, it's a lot of pictures to help the ones that are learning. The pictures help a lot. Sometimes with the papers, I put pictures on the papers as well. The sentence stems, like I've mentioned multiple times, just like I said, just a lot of visual stuff for the kids that are learning, the English kids, the ELA S kids.
Yeah, I think the strategic partners is a great idea, and it's a great way to differentiate for the needs of students, whether they're English language speakers or Spanish language speakers. Have you ever? There's a couple of teachers that I work with who have had to model a conversation with teachers before. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with accountability and having students talk on task. Have you ever modeled a conversation for an entire class of students, or is that not something that you have?
Oh, I've done it multiple times. Yeah, multiple times. Yeah, like I said, I've done that, especially this year. Like I said, with third grade, I had to model because I feel like they didn't maybe know what to expect. But yeah, I modeled what I expect them to do. Like I did it with another student that I know that could do it. All right. One of our health-related fitness components is muscular strength. I want my partner to say, one activity or exercise we can do to increase muscular strength is push-ups, So I had to model that a lot. And the more that I model, I feel like the better they've gotten. Like it has progressed significantly these last few weeks because of modeling, but also it's progressed because of the different resources that I've given them. I knew that it was hard for them just to do it off the TV. We have 30 kids in our third grade class, so there's a lot of kids in there too. And so I was like, I got to change this up because this is not working. So that's why I had to get the individual papers. And when they're with their partners, they had it right in front of them instead of having to look at, the TV or the board or whatever I have up there, So just giving them more resources has definitely helped. That modeling helped too. And I remodeled it with the fifth and fourth graders too, because I noticed that they were kind of getting a little bit off track and off task and not doing it the way that I wanted them to do it. And so I modeled it with them too. And once I modeled it, I feel like it's gotten better and they have gotten better talking and they're using full sentences, they're having conversations, so it's definitely gotten better once I modeled it.
Your level of reflection on your practice is just so inspiring. I mean, I've gotten a chance to work with you for, I don't know, I guess it's been about 8 or 10 years now. And I've always known that about you, but I really hope that that's something that people walk away from this conversation with, just how open you are about trying something new, experimenting with things. And if something doesn't work, you don't abandon the entire project. It doesn't sound like that's your first choice, right? You just try to find new ways to make it work for your students.
I feel like it helps. I know the students pretty well, like being here for so long and kids that have come up that have been here from first grade to fifth grade, like I feel like I know them really well. And I know the students that want to get better at doing this. And I know the students that try to stray away from it. And those are the ones that I try to get better at doing it because I know that they don't like doing it. I know that they don't want to do it. But those are the ones that I try to focus on because I know this is something that they do in their classrooms. I know this is something that they're going to be doing in middle school and high school. It's good for them to just learn how to have conversations with other people, people you don't know. So it's a good real world thing for them to learn as well.
Absolutely. I appreciate that connection you made back to the classroom as well, because I think that that's one of several things that differentiates PE teachers from other programs, right? Whether it's Playworks or just recess. And oftentimes, if teachers ever do give a hard time about students having to articulate their learning and not just physically demonstrate it. I feel like that is a major reason why. This is what makes a physical education program, as opposed to your principal coming in and hiring someone from Playworks, or just saying, oh, you know what, we're going to give kids an extra half hour of recess today. We don't really need to hire a full-time PE teacher. So I really appreciate you making that connection back to the classroom. Let's finish up with one last question. So I think that I know that you have done such a great job of convincing PE teachers out there that accountable talk structures are beneficial to their students and to their program. What advice would you give to a teacher who is interested in incorporating opportunities for accountable talk, but they might be a little bit nervous about it?
I mean, best advice is just don't give up. Keep trying, no matter if it works. If you don't think it's working, just keep trying different ways to do it. It'll take time. It'll take a lot of time, but the more you do it, the better they'll get. And I've seen that throughout my years here. I try to start them young as first grade, try to get them used to talking in first grade. And by the time they get to fifth grade, they're better and better and better. And they're better talking to each other. They're better at accountable talk. But like I said, it just takes a lot of practice, a lot of practice. And I've learned through a lot of the PEDs that we have, like our teal days, a lot of good stuff come from those teal days, and they give you good resources and good ways to go about doing this stuff too. It's not just me coming up with a lot of the stuff. I've gotten a lot of the stuff from the lead teachers. They give great stuff. And, it's one of those things where you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Use the resources that you have out there at DPS. I feel like DPS has an amazing PE program, and they've been like that for years. Gary's a great resource too, to have and come and help you. Like, I remember when I first started doing the accountable talk, Gary was observing me, and he had told me that it was too much talking. Like I overcorrected, like you said, I overcorrected it, and it was too much talking. And then I kind of had to figure out what a good balance was, but like I said, it'll take time, but they'll get it. You can't give up.
The overcorrection thing is funny because it happens all the time, but it's just a natural part of the process, right? When you're trying something new, you're going to spend a little bit more time in it. And then hopefully you make that pivot back to finding the most efficient ways to get students to articulate their learning so that we truly can maximize time and physical activity. I 100% agree with you. I think here in Denver, we have an incredible amount of resources for our PE department. I know that I'm lucky to be considered a part of it. The other part that I wanted to mention too was that students are doing these things in their classroom also. So I feel like classroom teachers themselves are a great resource. Yeah. If a PE teacher or any specials teacher went to the classroom teacher and asked them, hey, what accountable talk structure are students in your class most comfortable with? And what do you think it might look like if I tried to do that in the gym? I don't think there's a single classroom teacher out there who would turn down that conversation, right? I think they'd be really excited that the PE teacher is going to give students opportunities to articulate their learning. So I think classroom teachers would be another place to go for a great resource.
Oh, absolutely. Obviously they might use different techniques because it's a classroom, but they would give you just as many, other ways and resources to do it as well.
Mark, you're a natural at this. We're going to do this once a month, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What else you got? I can do it. Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate you having me on here. It's great.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it too.
Yeah. Thank you.